hold on, I'm not ready yet. I know, right? How y'all doing? You awake? 3 o'clock? Everybody get your candy and your cigarettes in so you can last through the afternoon. Okay, yeah, yes, no. So my name is Tazz. I work for Talos. I'm one of the threat researchers for them. And today we're going to have an example walkthrough of how we develop some threat intelligence. The objective here today is not for me to give you a list of IoTs. If that's what you were hoping for, you're not going to get it. So there's the door. If you would like to learn some skills in mindset, thinking, approach, techniques, and things like that, to maybe take back to your analyst or for yourself and your organization, that's what we're trying to do here today. Okay? I am always open for questions. I just ask that you kind of raise your hand, and I'll try to pause if I can, but as best as possible, let's try to hold our questions till the end. Just make a note of what slide I'm on, and we'll try to get through everything and then answer questions at the end, okay? So, a little bit about the story. I was working at a SOC at a company, had a lot of friends there, and prior to me starting to work there, of course, I wasn't privy to knowledge because of NDA that, like any other organization that provides infrastructure services, they had people that didn't like them, right? How many here work in infrastructure services or have friends that provide infrastructure support? Okay. You know there's always some bad guy out there that doesn't like the fact that an organization he doesn't like is using your company's services, right? You host their website, you provide them infrastructure, we don't like you, whatever, so we're going to attack you, right? Some kind of political motivation. So where I was working at, they had the same problem as anybody else. And there was a bad guy that had been doing some pretty awful things to them. And then I took it personal. I mean, he made it personal, actually. Like, you don't attack me and my friends and my family, and my job was my family, right? And my organization was my livelihood, right? So I took it personal to a degree. And he just got on my bad people's list. Like, you're on Tazz's shit list, and he sucks to be you, right? So I left them, and then I ended up going to Talos to do dedicated, full-time threat hunting and research and sharing about the threat hunting that we do. And so now it was my full-time job, not just being a SOC analyst and dealing with incidents, but a full-time job at getting to hunt bad guys and bad things on the internet. So when I left my other company, I couldn't take any of my research with me. Couldn't take any of my data. I mean, I had gigs and gigs of data and research that I had done there. All I could take with me was what was trapped between my 2 ears. So I got to Talos and I said, you know, I'm pretty sure this bad guy that's been doing these bad things where I was at isn't doing it by himself. I'm sure he's probably affecting other Cisco customers. Boss, is it okay if I see if I can go find this guy doing bad stuff to people? And he's like, well, yeah. And he said, don't use any of the data you have. I was like, I don't even have copies of it. I know I can find him. He has habits. He has patterns. He has behavior. I have come to know him as though he lives across the street from me. And so one of the things I started with was a domain of his. It had just stuck in my head. So I went and I pulled up this domain and I said, you know he used this domain to do bad things to us. I wonder if he did use this domain to do bad things to other people. And sure enough, he had used the domain to do bad things against other people. He was all over our telemetry. And I was like, okay. So where I found him was in phishing. He'd used his domains in a phishing email. And I looked at the subject line of the phishing email. And it really offended me because it was targeting women. And I was like, the audience for the fish was specifically women. I was like, you jerk face. That's not cool. So I was like, all right, I'm going to look into this. And so then I started to look at, now that I found his domain in this phishing email, then I started looking to see what other phishing emails there were related to that. And then I just said, oh my God. Now, first off, I didn't realize that Cisco actually sees about 35% of the world's email. So you can imagine the volume of data that I had available to me now versus when I worked at a small company, all I saw was our email, right? So now I'm seeing tons of people's email. And I started seeing like, wow, he's not out there doing this by himself. He's actually part of a bigger picture. Because I had the same email was being sent with different domains. Now, I went in looking for one grape, right? When I stepped back, I realized that it wasn't, I found the grape, but I had also found the entire vine that had all of the grapes on it. So this same email was being used to fish women still, but there were a bunch of other domains in it. So I said, well, who owns these domains? Well, he had Jack and John and Bill and Bob. And I said, well, how did Jack and John and Bill and Bob all happen to send the same email from 4 different countries? I was like, okay, not cool. So I said, started documenting where I was at. And I started with the one spam campaign, had 31 emails. And what you're seeing here is you're seeing my Maltico diagram as it began to grow. Little by little, I started looking at different aspects of the attack. One spam campaign, 31 emails. I went looking for one domain. There ended up being 16. I kept going, and kept going, and kept going, and the domains kept growing. 16 domains, maybe I had 10 different actors now, right? I started looking for one bad guy, and now I found a group of 10 of them. You know, Bill, Bob, John, their brothers and cousins. And I was like, okay, well, wait a minute. There's a lot of cooperation going on here. And so I actually decided it's time for me to just, now that I've done my cursory search, I need to develop a plan, and I need to start following, you know, an actual investigative process. And this is what I'm here to share with you guys about, is the actual process. The process itself doesn't necessarily change. The answers you get when you walk through it, though, will. So first we start with what we want to know when we're doing a threat intelligence investigation. In my case, I wanted to know what did the bad guy have available to him and could I find him, right? I knew something to do that. I knew this one domain had been used to do that thing. So I started with something small. Needle in the haystack, right? And then I wanted to know how big was my threat. I had to size it. So I had to define what was bad. And then I went and got data from a trusted resource. My trusted resource in this case was the telemetry that we had that my company owned, right? Sometimes the trusted source might be an open source resource. VirusTotal is a great open source trusted resource, right? OpenDNS, trusted resource. ThreatCrowd, trusted resource, right? So I decided, my organization, my team had defined it, and I always try to start with what we have first, right? Start with your own data. And then I started to ask questions about it. I started putting it together. I said, okay, well, I went in looking for one domain, one email, right? That began to expand. I said, okay, so what's important and what's relevant? How are they related? I identified the relationship being that it's almost the same subject line for all of the phishing emails, right? If the bad guys were smart enough. Bob and John had 2 spaces between the second word. Bill and Dave had 3 spaces between the second word. And then maybe they put an exclamation point in there. Tom, Dick, and Harry happened to misspell the same word that was almost the exact same subject line, but when they tried to spell the word hair, they spelled it H-A-R-E. Okay? So, if I'm trying to help people who are bald that don't want to be bald grow hair, and my subject line says how to grow back hair, H-A-I-R, and I go searching for subject lines like that, okay, but, well, is there a relationship to the ones that said H-A-R-E? Then I had to start changing the way I was searching my data. I had to say, all right, I've got this subject line that's 10 words long. I'm going to search my telemetry by subject line. How should I do my searches? I had to get with people that were smarter than me and way better than me at Reddit, because Tazz hates Reddit. I put a regex in front of me, I'm like 0-9, I'm done. That's it. Don't ask me nothing else, right? \w dot plus, give me everything, right? So anyway, I had to do some analysis, right? Well, the problem is that we always want to hurry up and get an answer to a question so we can do something about it, right? You want to know why it's bad, how can I detect it, how can I whack the mole on the head and move on to the next mole? Because that's what operations do, right? Security operations. Cosmic firefighters. Who here has been in the box? How many firefighter hats do you wear? You are fighting fires in email. You're fighting fires on the network. You're fighting fires on the web. You're a constant firefighter, right? So we need to hurry up and get to an answer. So I will tell you that when you're trying to develop threat intelligence, and mind you, the kind of intelligence we're talking about is tactical threat intelligence, not strategic. If it's tactical, it's because I'm looking at something that's going on now. I don't need an answer now to address the problem now. That is not strategic intelligence. That is tactical threat intelligence. You're dealing with a current threat and researching to get current answers so that I can take immediate action on them. Okay? So after I do a little bit of aggregation and analyzing, I want to hurry up and get to design protection. But what really happens? What really happens is that I go from aggregating and analyzing and I just got more freaking questions. And I have to go back to my data. So what's not represented on this slide is this cycle here. This is a repeated process. After you've done your cursory search in your telemetry or in your data or wherever you're looking to get your answer, I promise you, if you didn't get more answers and more things to look at, then you haven't done it right. Okay? You don't want to boil the ocean. Unfortunately, sometimes you have to start with the ocean before you can start picking out the right fish. Right? You throw down a big net, you get a bunch of data back. And you say, no, we were looking for fish, not crabs. Throw those away. You don't want lobsters. That needs to go. Let's get that out of my data set. And what else do I have left? Start to see, you can see trends or patterns. A whole bunch of these are from this country. A whole bunch of these were in an IP subnet. Oh, that's NASA's subnet. Nope, we don't mess with that. Let's throw that out of our data, you know. So you get your answers back when you ask your questions of your data. And usually they're going to lead to a second and third or fourth order set of questions. You keep asking the questions until you get to the point that you can do something about what you have found. Okay? After you can do something about it, then you should push that out to your network or your devices or whatever widget or vector on your network the action needs to be put in place. Maybe it's an access control list. Maybe it's something that's added to a web proxy. Maybe it's the tweaking or the tuning of a sensor, a threshold, something. Whatever it is when you're developing your threat intelligence, at the end of the day, you need to be asking yourself, what do I want to achieve? I did all of this hunting today. What do I know? What do I not know? And what do I want to achieve? So I know a lot of things, but I don't know these things. So these are the questions I need to go answer. Based on what I do know, is there anything I can do? Is there any high-level action I can take that's not going to have a derogatory impact on our users or the network or anything? Is there a little bitty, teeny, tiny betterment that I can put in place? Sometimes the answer is no. How many of you here manage IT people who do research or threat intelligence? Anyone? How many of you here have ever managed anybody that works in anything across stuff? Would it freak you out if you asked them what did you find today and they say nothing? I can't tell you how many managers just, what do you mean you didn't find anything? There's so much bad stuff out there. Well, I don't have anything that I can tell you with confidence yet. I can tell you I got a lot of data back, and I've got to go through the data. And don't be afraid to tell people that. You're going to develop good threat intelligence. Velocity and doesn't equal volume. And volume doesn't equal quality. Just because you got a lot doesn't mean it's good. Just because if you put mandates on your people to give you reports, guess what? You will get reports. If you set a metric that says your job and your employment or your bonus is tied to X number of reports that I get, you will get X number of reports. Will they be useful? How do you know? You don't. Right? Don't try to paycheck in your livelihood to the number of things they give you when it comes to threat intelligence. Because I guarantee you get a report of something, and the best bullshit is going to make it sound good. He's going to make sure he gets his own fair paycheck. Thank God we don't do that now. But that's my guideline. So you have a process in how you're going to develop threat intelligence. It's a repeatable process, it's a framework for people like this, right? Maybe not the regular process, it's a framework, it's a guideline. So when you're going to ask something about your data, you need to ask specific questions. In my scenario, I wanted to know who was buying what domains where. That was the question I decided, what do I want to know? I wanted to know who was selling those TLDs, who was registrars, right? But I now realize I got a lot of bad guys. I need to back up. I need to get a little bit bigger. I need to get some perspective. And what's the connection? Like I said, how did 5 guys in 4 different countries all send the same email within, there was a bulk of them that came in a month, over the course of a week, every week there was 225, and then all of a sudden it died off. That email spam campaign, and people will say campaign, I don't like the word campaign, because the campaign can do 3 emails, okay? Campaign, in a lot of people's brains, we're looking for like 5,000 emails or hundreds of thousands of emails. No, especially if it's a spear phishing attack, the campaign could be 2 emails. It could be 1 email a week or every other week for 6 months. And you got 12 emails over 6 months. But if it's spear phishing, that could be a campaign. Okay, so be careful how you define the word campaign in the organization. So I had to define bad, and I had to go get my data. I wanted to know, set my criteria, that I decided so this investigation was acceptable. For a different investigation, this criteria might not work. You have to define bad and what you're looking for each time. In this case, I have noticed that among the small subset of emails that I had looked at to begin with, TLDs they were using for their domains that were registering was .download. And everybody here is saying in their brain, yeah, that's a perfect TLD for a fish, right? .download, because everybody's got a .download, right? Even legitimate companies have .download. Smart ones have gone out and bought their domain .download so that nobody else could fish their employees with it, or worse than something malicious. Then I wanted to know how many email addresses did I have for registrants that were part of .download. How many different countries were these registrants working in? How many IP addresses were associated with these domains? How many ISPs were helping? Because Cisco were really big. When we reach out to an ISP and say, hey, we think people are doing bad things on this stuff, can you work with us? ISPs work with us to help stop bad guys from doing bad things. And now we're like, how many name servers are they using? Do they own the name server? Is the IP shared hosting or is it private? So these are 2 questions. I was trying to get metrics, metadata about my data, right? So then I decided to take a look at .data. I asked the exact same questions. I collected the same data points because I need to compare an apple to an apple, right? I think one of the worst things I see when people try to do threat intelligence is they ask a bunch of questions, and then when they get to something else, it has a new piece of metadata that the first set of data needs to get. They start, oh, wait a minute, what about this? There's a bunch of different things I can find out about a domain. Anybody who's done Google lookup or done domain tools that will be data about IP addresses or domains, about domains and registrants, you'll know that there's lots of other metadata I could have collected, right? But I chose not to. I had to stick within what I decided was relevant to this investigation. And then I said, listen, I had noticed another popular one I had been used was .page. So I went and grabbed the data about that. You guys notice what's highlighted in yellow, right? What's unique about the yellow and red ones in relationship to the rest of the numbers up here? Somebody. No, because they go from 40 to 24, right? But in this slide, what's important about 40 and 42 versus the rest of the numbers? They're small. What about here? Small. In relationship, now granted in this one, name servers did jump, right? It's larger than ISPs, right? Again, small, right? So I observe different trends. But from an analyst perspective, I want to start small sometimes, right? Could you imagine if I tried to go analyze 2,200 IP addresses and find a trend? What's easier to find a trend in, right? A concentration. And a concentration, when I've already identified the fact that I've got at least 6 different people working together, 6 divided into this small number is a lot easier to analyze, right? So what did we learn about when we define bad, then what? After we define bad, we have to agree on what? Which pieces of metadata we want to look at, right? Now, when I went and did this actually led me to more questions. So although you see 3 TLDs up here for the sake of discussion, I went through 15 of them. Because when I saw these trends, I looked at some of the IPs, I started looking at some of the countries, I started looking at some of those small numbers, and I was like, wait a minute, I found the same small number over here, and I go back to the email data. Did I notice this anywhere else? And maybe the same from the commerce too. I see that anywhere else. I go back to my data. So I did that circular. When I started looking at these top 3, I said, I got more questions. You go look for more. So I actually looked at about 15 of them. So then I said, okay, got this data. My other question was, why these TLDs, right? I started with my questions at the beginning. Why these TLDs? Why these and why these registrars? So I said, let's go take a look at them. The TLDs that I decided to look at, again, I started big, and I narrowed it down. These are the TLDs that I decided to look at. The reason I chose them was because I had done a cursory analysis of my spam emails that I had found, and these were the ones that either A, I thought had sketchy values, like your sketchiness factor is really up there if you're sending somebody to .download. You're a douchebag if you're using .face to fish people. So I went and go find out people that were douchebags. .top, my coworker who eats, sleeps, breathes, died angler, he had noticed an increase in .top programs that I mentioned him. Hey, you notice a lot of these anglers right now, and I just did .top. So that one made the list, because that was awesome in there. So sometimes when I was answering my question of what am I going to go look at, I took into context research that my peers were doing that could be relevant to what I was doing. So as an analyst, that's another thing, do not operate in a silo. It's great for you to be focused on your work, but you need to share with your team what you're working on, because you never know when somebody else has found something that's relevant to what you're working on. Communication amongst your analysts is critical to the overall success of your organization. I cannot stress that enough. You need to get them together at least once a week and have a semi-informal, little bit of structure to stay on time. Hey guys, what's everybody working on? What you got? What are you working on? You got a ticketing system, maybe formalize up a little bit. And we have a habit where, not even a habit, it's very, I don't know if the word is requirement, but it's something that the team has agreed to do, that when we find something that's interesting, that we go make a ticket that we're going to look into this, a research ticket, research topic. And sometimes when I was doing this research, as I dug into people and things, I found other stuff that needed to be investigated. I went and made a ticket, and I'll look at the data, because I wanted to stay on track for this investigation. That's probably one of the things analysts who always want to ask questions will really, really bad at. Ooh, shiny food. What is that? Why did he register with that IP? What is he doing in that? Oh, that name is cool. I wonder if, oh, maybe that's in another, oh, that phishing email I had. And we do that all the time. And we've never answered the previous question, but we're finding all this other cool stuff to go look at. and it needs to be looked at, but not all of it needs to be looked at now. So go make a ticket or something, or in other teams, I used to like literally give my team colored, like tons of sticky notes, and I had the I want to look at this later wall, and we decorated a whole wall with sticky notes. And when times were low, we'd go grab a sticky and find something to dig into, right? So sometimes you have to do that. But back to the topic at hand, I defined what was bad. I decided the criteria that I was going to use to narrow down my data set. I narrowed it down. My second question I wanted to answer was, why these TLDs? So I went and looked at the TLDs, and then I went and looked at the registrars. These registrars are up here for a variety of criteria that they met. Some of them were ones that I had used previously. Others were there because of reputation. Almost all of them were there because they offered one or more of the TLDs previously. In fact, that was one of my requirements, was to be in this group that I picked. You had to be selling one or more of the TLDs. So, pop quiz. Why did they choose the providers they chose? How many of you think it was because of the country that the provider operated in? We're in Russia, we don't care about what you do. How many of you think that the bad guys picked based on the country? Yeah. How many of you think that the bad guy picked them based on the terms of service and the guarantees that they got in uptime? Got a couple votes for that. How many of you think that the bad guy picked the registrar based on their customer service? You never get anybody that votes for that one. What about business reputation? Business reputation goes both ways, doesn't it? Bad guys say they're a really good person to go register at. Good guys say bad guys never will come over here and register, right? So there's reputations on both sides of the fence here. The answer is no. That's why they chose this register. Now, how did I come to that conclusion? I started looking at what the price of the TLDs were and the volume of vendors that were selling in that price point. So all the registrars I had listed, one of them was selling the domains at 49 cents or less. 4 of them were selling them at 50 cents to 99 cents. 6 of them were selling them between $1 and $1.50. And of course, the other 9 were over $1.50. So if I'm a bad guy and I'm going to do phishing and I'm going to run phishing campaigns, how fast do you think I hit the spam list? Pretty quickly, right? So if I want to run a global campaign, I probably need to have a lot of domains accessible to me, right? In my arsenal, right? I need to have domains that are going to burn through them pretty quickly. Well, if I got to buy a lot of them, don't I want to buy them cheap? And this is why we call the talk Malware Magnets. Once I had done this, I was actually able to have a piece of actionable intelligence. Seems like common sense, but I now had the data to prove my theory, which was when domains go on discount, all the bad guys migrate to that registrar. And people thought I was crazy. They're like, you know, there's some of the registrars that can go to. But what we started noticing was that, yes, phishing campaigns were going on, but the TLDs being used were coming in waves. .top came in a wave. Angler, when it went just off the chart, all .top went on sale for 40 cents, record low for that TLD. Of course, bad guys who are leveraging Angler were going to be using .top domains to redirect and stuff like that. Okay, so we had an actionable piece of intelligence. So now I can actually anticipate where the bad guys might be coming from once I become aware that this registrar has put something on sale, right? So I can start looking for things coming from their IP space or an increase in traffic coming from their IP space, right? Next time. But I didn't start knowing it. I had a hunch. I had an idea, and I had to figure out how to prove it. So, then I wanted to know, not only do I have I figured out that I'm going to get a concentration of bad guys. I wanted to know who was the baddest of that, right? So that was my other question. Who's buying them? Because I need to figure out who I need to stop, right? Because, I mean, it's great to know where they're probably going to migrate to the next time a TLD fail happens, right? But I want to know if there's any trend in bad guys, because I thought I had observed a trend, in my opinion, of at least 6 people working together. So I went out and I made use of Domain Tool's ability to track registrants. And that's this screenshot that you see up here, an example of what I get in an email. So Domain Tool has a really awesome API where I've set a script now that I've done all of this research. And at first, I didn't know what I was going to get. So I had taken those TLDs, I had taken the phishing, I had taken my criteria of what was bad, you know, risk score over 90, greater than or equal to 90, and used risk scores from various sources, primarily Domain Tools. They have a tool called IRIS. I don't know if you guys know that. You guys might talk to Domain Tools about their IRIS tool, but if you're doing some research and hunting, it gives you data that you get more beyond who is. But they work with us, which is so awesome. And OpenDNS also will have risk, because you guys ever seen run an OpenDNS and target and see at the top whether it was benign, 100, or I like to sketch kind of, you know, or possible DGA, and you get back a value from them as well. But in this case, as a shortcut, I was like, look, I don't have time every day to go looking these people up, Domain Tools, and I already built something, going to build for me. And they started telling me how many domains these people were registering. Oh, I didn't explain how I got people names. Okay, so how did I get the name? I went, when I used my criteria to pull down, you know, greater than 90, risk score greater than 90, and all those other things we talked, I pulled out the registrants. And what I found was that the same registrants were at all these different registrars across the board. At some registrars, they had 100 domains. At other registrars, they had 600. At another registrar, one guy had 1,000 domains. Who the hell needs 1,700 domains? Nobody. Unless you're a reseller, and if you're a reseller, well, you're a reseller in China and you're renting them for 50 cents a piece, or 50 cents a month, then yeah, you ain't doing nothing good with that. So anyway, you're now on my radar. So I said, before I start blacklisting everybody stuff, because I'm not going to blacklist the whole internet, it's not okay. I was like, let me see what they're doing. Because one thing I didn't have time to answer the question was, how long did it take this person to get these many domains, right? So I picked some of the guys. Actually, I picked the top 100, and I went for, top 100, and then I narrowed it down to 50 because I didn't want to use up all my registration. I was like, okay, who's doing what? And I started getting emails back, and I said, holy smokes, what do you need 500 domains for? And then, wait a minute, no, it's actually 750. And truth be told, it's actually more than that, because that's just what the email sends me. It'll send me, in the body of my email, the domain that was registered, the name it was registered to, and gives me who it was. So I started getting some of these back, and I started monitoring them. And I was like, okay, so the guy that did 3 of 3, and these come back in the order in which you put them in. So it's not alphabetical. So I was like, all right, well, this guy I first tried to look for, he was only registered 3 domains. There's 3 in the body of the email. These other 2 people, they're registering a lot of domains. And I said, okay. I kept it going. Come May, the guy's still registering 222 domains that day. This is per day. He's doing this. The other guy's registering 30. And down here it gives me an example of the information that I was getting back in the email. So we started going through this and parsing this out and monitoring them to see what they were doing. And then I had to pick a metric, right? So I said, okay, I've got 142 email addresses, registering email addresses for .download. There were 9,000 bad .download domains. Remember, I defined bad as risk score greater than or equal to 90, right? Okay? So there were well more than 9,000 domains registered. But 9,000 at that time, that snapshot in time, that had been deemed risk score greater than 90. Like, if you go here, you're going to get fish, packed, delivered, a payload, something to that domain. That meant there were about 63 domains being registered per person. Had about 26 domains per registrant for .date and .face. And I did this for everybody. I had to pick a measure. I had to pick something, right? I've got all this metadata. I've got to pick something. And it's okay if you pick something and it's not the right thing and it doesn't give you what you want the first time, but you don't know it, you go look. It's like trying to tell me what's behind door number 3 and you never got to be behind door number 3. Okay? And it's kind of how it's going to work when you're doing your threat intelligence investigation. So look, and the best thing that you can do is note the fact that it doesn't matter. That is insignificant. You know why? Because after you tell your boss 3 days in a row, I haven't found anything, when you do find something, you've already answered all the questions you've done asked because you've already looked. So your confidence factor in which you do determine as a reason for X activity or behavior is significantly higher because you've invested the time to explore all the avenues and options. So when you don't find what you're looking for, that doesn't mean you failed. That means you are 1%, 2% closer to confidence. And when you do find something that is a logical conclusion, explanation, or an actionable piece of intelligence. And I've done this before. I said, you know what, I think you need to start doing this. Well, now I don't know, Tazz, you don't need to do that. And not so much here at Talos, but more where I was at, where I was like, well, no, I think we need to start monitoring this, or we need to change this threshold. Well, why? Well, because I looked for this, and this, and it's none of these 10 things, and that only leaves these 2 options. And then my boss was like, oh, well, here he thought it could be 15 different possible explanations. And I'm saying, let's go tune this sensor. Well, why? Well, because I looked to see if this might be causing it, and that's not causing it. I looked to see if this might be causing it. That's not causing it. Like Chris's talk, or not Chris's talk, the gentleman that did before. You guys are in here, he's talking about the tool. It can go out and it can evade your timeouts, your captchas, your everything else, and it can brute force passwords and get in. Yeah, what was it? Sentry. That's right, Sentry. And so, if you can go out and you say, well, I think we need to tune this, well, why? Because, well, I've eliminated the fact that it's not a web server, it's not a service account, it's not a this and that, it's not this and that, it's not this, it's not this. It's got to be one of these other 2 over here. Okay? So when I'm developing threat intelligence, I take a metric. And I decide, does it tell me anything? I look deeper into it. Sometimes the answer is no. Or the answer is, there's something there, but there's not enough time available to explore this avenue, and I don't make a ticket to go look at that later, because I need to be able to do something now, right? Tactical intelligence. So, I took a look, I picked those metrics, and I said, you know what, let's go look at emails to domains. And this is really hard, I apologize, you guys, I thought we were going to have different writing in here. And I started with the 1 spam campaign, 31 emails, 16 domains, and I wound up with 12 registrants. And I think, okay, let's do it again. Let's do it again. Let's go get a URL in the spam. Let's research the domain. Let's get the details about the registrant. Find the domain registered to that actor. Check the spam with that domain. And I did this over and over and over and over until I could say with certainty, all right, Bob, these guys right here, out of however many registrants I had identified on one of the domains that had been listed, these guys right here are the top 50 bad guys. And when I say bad guys, let me clarify. Just because there's a real person's name and a real person's phone number and a real person's address on a domain does not mean a real person is behind that. Domain registrations can be automated. Unfortunately, real people's information gets stolen all the time. Email addresses get made for people that isn't really their email address. people's email addresses get owned and they would give up on them and they go register another one and the bad guy is taking over their legitimate email address. So when I'm saying bad guy, I'm saying the bad guy that's behind that registration information. I'm not saying that that real life person is necessarily the bad guy. I have to be able to prove, which law enforcement is supposed to do, that that guy is using these details. I'm just talking about being able to identify them from an automated process. So this email address is being used to register domains that are doing bad things. So that's what I mean when I'm saying registering bad guys. But I did this over and over and over, and this is the circle I was talking about at the beginning. So in this exercise, this is how I developed some threat intelligence regarding spam and people that were prolific in our data attacking us. So why am I not giving you the email address? The answer's not in the slide, but why am I not giving you the email address? What's key about threat intelligence? What is the word threat? What's a threat to your phone? What's a threat to your phone? What's a threat to your company? What industry are you in? Oil and energy, health, schooling. Who's in health? Who's in oil and industry? Oil and energy. Who's in services? Who's in recruiting? Come on, you guys. Y'all don't have jobs and not a single handler. Who's in an industry that I didn't mention? Automotive. So why am I not giving you the emails of these bad guys? What if not a single one of their domains is being used to spam or phish you? It's not relevant. It doesn't matter, therefore you shouldn't care. Right? If I make blue widgets to attack blue people and you're green, do you care about blue widgets and blue people? No, because you're green people. You care about the people making green widgets to attack green people, right? That's why I'm not giving you a list of emails and IOCs, because this intelligence was developed for my organization. This is what was relevant to us. This is the people that were attacking us. This is the people who had risk scores that matter to us, from our metrics and how we define that. You may not define it the same way. They may have not be bothering you at all. Now, the good news is if you're a Cisco customer and they potentially were going after you, then you're benefiting because we are blacklisting and blocking the things. But the point is that I'm not, the IoTs and all of this, everything that I've done here was relevant to who? Me, and my customer, and my organization. Okay, so I kept looking and doing that repeatable process over and over and over, and I started diagramming it out, because the picture's worth 1,000 words. And I started noticing, and I don't know if you can see this down here. You guys see that little circle that's around them? Okay? See, I got a blue dot here and a blue dot here. And a blue dot represents a domain. The light blue dot represents an email address. So when I started using Maltego to diagram these, because I've been doing this for a while, I showed this up here and how it's circle. That jumped out at me. That W jumped out at me because it's data overlap. It's one email address that is used for 2 different domains, right? So the end state of this is a monster. You wouldn't really expect it right now. But I started building a little bit at a time. Each time I found more data, I added a little bit here. And I stuck to this, when I was doing this immediately, I stuck to this very small subset of email. Like I said, it grew unruly to the point that I was talking about earlier that I had found the top 500 people that had multiple thousands of registered that were being used to this, right? But this is where I started. So I started to find the trend that I talked about earlier. They were moving around from registrar to registrar. Whatever the TLD was, TLD 1, registrars 1 through 6, there's my bad guys. Dark blue, ice cream, and the polar bear. Well, then I have my Halloween actor, Then I had my Treesy Woodsy actors, and I had Mr. Polar Bear. So Mr. Polar Bear was at was in favor of TLD1 and TLD2, right? Mr. Polar Bear did not care about TLD3. Mr. Polar Bear did like TLD4. But what do you notice about the colors in the circles in each of the columns? They appear in more than one place, right? So I had more data overlap. Same bad guys, multiple places, using multiple TLDs, but and across multiple registrars. Do you think they might be working together? I didn't know this when I started. I didn't go looking for this. I went looking for one bad guy that had been attacking some people. I had no idea that he was part of a larger organization. Does that make sense? Remember I told you that as you start to ask questions of your data, you're going to get more questions, right? So I started having to ask different questions, like, okay, well, maybe this is bigger than what I thought. I was looking to stop one little thing, one guy that was targeting certain people, that was targeting women with particular phishing emails that he had been using. And then lo and behold, I actually uncovered an entire organization of people, or group, let's say group of people that could probably be related. I drew the conclusion that they were working in concert. Whether it was physical human beings, or people that had written bots and tools to go to domain registrations in bulk and were automating this work because they came and watched Chris talk about automating the procedure manually. And they came here and they showered thinking out and they got something. We're going to go get phishing sites thanks to Chris now, you know. So, no, I'm joking. He knows I'm giving this crap. So, after I had done all this and I had finally drawn this conclusion and I had identified the group, I was able to say, now I can do something with what I know. Now I can take an action. Now I actually have a piece of threat intelligence. I have been able to identify a group of people working in concert that are repeat offenders of scamming and phishing. And as I had gone through, I actually gone out and in my analysis process, I went to go see what do the domains do, what's on the domain. I started noticing that a bunch of them had the same page. How did John, Bob, Tom, Dick, and Harry, all in 5 different countries, have the same freaking webpage? Identical webpage. And oh, by the way, because Walter was going to go and hear that, if they answer a few questions, they got 3 Walmart gift cards to help them discount the cost of the product that you're selling. You just have to give your name, your phone number, your address, your email. And the last 4 of your credit card numbers, and then I would send you the gift card. So, but I was able to actually do something. We actually began to, and we started small. I don't know if I got this on the next slide. But started small. Granted, I identified these 50, but I wanted to make sure that I wasn't having a derogatory impact on people that are doing legitimate business. Like maybe there was a legitimate reseller out there, and he was just trying to make use of a good discount so that he could register domains and resell them, right? He could be a good guy that's not up to no good, and he's reselling his domains, but he's caught up in this because he met my metrics, right? It is very possible that you can find legitimate people that look bad. So you have to be careful when you decide what you're going to do about it when you're in a company that's around the system. We are global. When I blacklist something, it's blacklisted off of a lot of people. If you choose to blacklist something at an enterprise level, then you have the level of impact of the size of your enterprise, right? So you have anybody here manage blacklist or whitelist ever? How many times did you have somebody scream, oh my God, I need to get to that after you blacklist it, right? You have certain processes in place to use some trusted blacklist. Things that are legitimate do make it to blacklist by accident sometimes, okay? But because I know the impact that I can have when I blacklist something, I have to do a little bit more due diligence. So I did go out and I started with some of the worst people or people that I knew I could confirm and tie to beyond a fish, that some of these domains had been used to deliver malware, like documented like via our telemetry. I could say not only were you using this domain to fish, this, on your website, you were also delivering lossy or random phishing waste infrastructure, right? It's spin cycles on a server, it's hardware that's burning out faster, it's email servers that are storing email that they don't need because we all delete our spam out of our deleted box, right? How do we all do that? So I thought it would start small. So I took that registrant list, and at first it was manual. I actually took it, and I said, all right, let's go take a look at some of these domains that the other bad guys were registering. Go see what they're doing. And I'd monitor them for a day or two. And sure enough, within 24 hours of registering it, it was in my telemetry. Next day, they registered 5 more domains. One guy registered 20, another guy registered 300. Most, if not all of them, showed up in my spam telemetry. Some of them, of course, come in unknown. And, you know, customers or however they've set their email filters, whether or not they automatically report spam to us or not, they're seeing your domain coming in and they're either already categorized as spam by some customers but not others. I was like, all right. So now I've verified my suspicion that what they're registering is bad. And I ended up taking some additional action after that. And I started saying, all right, if you register it, bad guy, I'm going to mark it bad. And my customers can't go to your site for at least 2 weeks. At least. Depending upon which bad guy it was. Some of them, they just get flat out like, yeah, completely bad, you're not allowed to go. Like the automatic conviction level. But I had to put a lot of thought into, well, now that I can do something about it, what do I want to do? I recommend that you take progressively stricter action when possible. In some cases, that's not a luxury that you have. Once you have confirmed a suspicion or a hunch or a theory that you have to be stronger and then lighten up later. It just depends upon what kind of threat you're hunting, right? So you've gone to the process, you've analyzed your data, you've got more questions. You've gone back to your data, you've asked another question, you've narrowed it down, you've narrowed it down, you've narrowed it down. Now you've got something you can do something about, but what do you do? Okay, that's a whole nother thought process about what to do. But the point is that as an analyst, you have enabled your organization to make an informed decision and take an action based on information and intel, not just suspicion, buzz, data, and the latest news release that hits CNN or NBC. Okay? How many times have you guys had a CEO hit a CIO or CTO and say, hey, are we blocking that? Well, no, dude. We're not blocking that, but we don't want anybody to go to China anyway, so it doesn't matter. We block all traffic to China. Yeah, of course we're blocking that, right? But whatever the case may be, once you have decided you got an answer or you got something that you guys need to do something about, put it together, and then maybe you get to take the action, maybe your network team gets to take the action. But remember something I said way back earlier, that we're getting together how often? At least once a week, talking about what we're working on, right? And it's not just the stock analysts that are getting together. You've got the NOC analysts, you've got the business analysts, you've got the abuse team. All of you are getting together once a week and saying what you're looking at. Because guess what? Once you came up with your piece of intelligence, I promise you the rest of everybody's going to want to know. So there's going to be something that can be done at a variety of levels, right? So, threat intelligence is an iterative process. It is not a one and done, okay? Even after I implemented those blacklists or those domains, I monitored those guys to see if they continue to register stuff. Some people continue to register under that registration. Others disappeared, right? I kept an eye on blocks. Right? Web blocks. How much web traffic did I now see a spike in now that I've gone and blacklisted all of these things, right? If there was a spike, which registrant stuff was it to? He might be a badder guy than all of the other guys, but he might have been the one flying under the radar that was only registering 3 domains, right? Just because he's the loudest doesn't mean he's the baddest, right? And actually a really big guy doesn't make a lot of noise. are a really good bad guy. Okay? When you decide you want to investigate something, have an objective. I encourage you to write on a dry erase log the question you're trying to answer. Every day when you come into work, look at the questions you're trying to answer with that current investigation. Is the work you're doing leading to an answer? If not, you've probably gone down a rabbit hole. Doesn't mean it doesn't need to be explored, just may not need to be explored now or by you because you don't have enough time. Maybe one of your coworkers has time and you don't. Throw it over the fence and let them look at it. Put it in a cube. Put it on a sticky, put it on the wall. Don't lose sight of it. It might reveal something later, just like my investigation did. But make sure that whatever you're working on is trying to answer the questions that you have written down, right? Don't be afraid to change direction. Sometimes, once you started looking at something, you might lift up a rock and you might see a 100-foot python underneath there. Of course, you're going to drop the rock and run, but you might just ask your boss and say, "Boss, I know you had us looking at this, but guess what I just uncovered? This is like a major ransomware cesspool over here. Like, should we look at this, or should we look at something else?" Sometimes you need to be ready to change direction, and the ticket that you are working on now becomes the one that gets put on the back burner. But talk to somebody about what you find. If you find something really significant, you might need to focus on that may not be answering the original question. Okay? Not everything you look at is going to yield an answer. But what does it help us do? Be more confident about the answer or the conclusion we come to, right? So it's not wasting your time. And from research to results is not a perfect cycle. It is not a circle, not that perfect. Oh, I got a question, I got an answer, and then I got this question, I got a question, I got an answer. It doesn't work like that. Okay? Sometimes you're going to bounce around. Sometimes you're going to put a protection in place, and somebody gets a 2 o'clock phone call at 2 a.m. What in the did you do? The dashboard is lighting up. Nobody can send an email. Nothing can get into the network. Oops, that was supposed to be you know? So understand that once you decide you're going to take action, this goes back to my warning earlier. Maybe you might want to start small with whatever you're going to convict or block or prevent or whatever action you're going to take. A little bit of measure at times. And I don't know what happened in my life. Just not it. That's it. Okay. So, I have about 2 minutes for questions. Unless you guys want to see me later. Yes. I did have to put it on the back burner at times. Sometimes I'll do speaking engagements like this, and when I do, normally I just sit up till 2 o'clock in the morning because I just have to know, like I can listen. But overall, I started looking at it in January. I took some snapshots at the end of January, and then in February, I went out to some of the domains, the CLDs, and registrars, and I started scraping. I literally scraped all the pricing, and it wasn't easy. From all 20 different registrars of what their pricing was. I started putting all that data into spreadsheets and databases and things like that because I collected my data so I could start figuring out, answering my questions, why were you here and who was here and why this registrar and all that. This is how I ended up coming to the conclusion that it was money, which was the common denominator, almost all of them was a low cost. So I think if you want to take the beginning to end calendar-wise, it may have taken me because in April, I think is when I actually started to look at a minor blacklisting, maybe 60 days. But if you count off the number of man hours that I put into it, 80, 122 per week. So if I could sit down and have just done it with no interruption, 2 to 3 weeks maybe. I've had things that I'm still working on, that I've been working on for a while, but prior to the patient, I took a week back, I've been doing things. And then I find out if my theory was right. So that's questions. Any other questions? Okay. I will be outside if anybody's going on something with hospital people. Feel free to grab me, and that's my Twitter account. My Twitter is open to any DMs, so you don't have to follow me to DM me. Did anybody learn anything? Was this helpful?
Yeah.
Can you take